Hello everybody and welcome to my 100 Days of Valheim. In this video, I have one of the craziest experiences that I thought would never be possible in Valheim. I also have a huge end goal for this world, which I will go into more detail later. Now, as well as some crazy stories, we are playing this game slightly modded. I wanted to try out what mods there are and what they can offer to the game, and decided on 4 mods to use throughout this playthrough. These 4 mods are Valheim Plus, Teleport Everything, Plant Everything, and Item Drawers. Some people could argue this changes how the game is played, but I believe gaming should be fun, and playing with these mods, I had a blast. But enough chit chat, let's get into the game. We start our Valheim journey by gathering some basic materials and killing the local wildlife. I found flint early on, which would allow me to craft a flint pickaxe very quickly. I stumbled onto a beehive and made quick use of a workbench to tear down part of someone's home in order to obtain a bee. I assassinated a deer, followed by destroying more homes to extract bees for my interests. After a bit of roaming around, I decided to take shelter in an abandoned home for the night to prepare myself for the next day. On day 2, I started by destroying more homes for my benefit, gaining many bees along the process. I spent most of the day doing this. Afterwards, I did some cooking and upgraded my workbench and gear before deciding it was time to call it a night. On day 3, after some last minute preparations, I knew I could take the first boss easily, so I decided to go over to the altar and summon the first boss. I placed the fallen boss's head on the hook, and instead of going home and making a pickaxe, I decided to do a little exploring before nightfall. I found myself in a black forest at night, and was quickly getting swarmed by grey dwarfs. So I ended my night there, and decided I would continue my explorations in the morning. On day 4, I used the antlers from the boss fight to craft myself a pickaxe, which I could use to extract copper and tin from the black forest. While exploring the Black Forest, I visited my first burial chambers. After clearing some hordes of skeletons, I ran into an archer that wrecked my shit, so I left the burial chambers, farmed up a little bit of tin, then booked it home for the night, grabbing a beehive on the way. On day 5, I headed back into the burial chambers to finish what I had started. While I clear these skeletons, let me finally tell you what my goal for the world is. So in Valheim, there isn't much out there in terms of PvP, and I wanted to change that. My goal was to create a massive PvP arena, then open up the server for other players to join in and fight. I don't know how well it would work, but we're gonna go for it anyways and see how it goes. I also wanted to create a hub that will hold everything necessary to be a strong Viking warrior, including all workbenches, multiple farms, and the best comfort I can achieve on this world. This will be quite the grind, so I hope you stick around to see how this plays out. After clearing out the rest of the skeletons and gaining some much needed supplies, I got myself a little bit of copper before deciding to call it a night. On day 6, I decided to get my bee friends placed so that they can begin producing honey, which would be vital in my progression. I went back to farm copper when a troll came along and decided he would pick a fight with me. Now, skeletons and grey dwarfs, I don't mind them, but trolls, I got a bone to pick with them. Instead of putting him down immediately like the sick dog that he is, I decided I would use and abuse him a little bit beforehand and make him farm the copper deposit for me. I then used his flesh to make some new pants, then called it a night. We start day 7 off strong by watching civil war break out in the Black Forest. Though the skeletons were putting up a fight, I saw they were outnumbered and decided to help, since I knew that if I didn't, I would be the next target. Afterwards, I spent the day hunting and clearing burial chambers until we stumbled onto a peculiar room, one which would give me vast riches as well as the next boss location. I knew I would have to move quickly, so we called it a night in preparation for the next day. Since it was raining on day 8, I did a little bit of cooking and then spent the day renovating my home. I made a cauldron, made some last minute patches to my home, then called it a night. I was in high gear on day 9. Farming loads of copper, and I mean loads of it. After I cooked like Walter White, then farmed wood. What am I doing? Oh my god. I flattened the terrain around me, did some more cooking, and then went to bed. Day 10, I made some bronze, then did my daily farm and collected bees. though something would happen to me on this day that would change my course entirely. After capturing the 2-star boar, I made sure he was secure before feeding him some raspberries. Then I built a little shelter nearby and called it a night. We checked up on our new friend on day 11, making some upgrades to the base, when I noticed some text appear on my screen. A Grey Dwarf raid. I was quick to kite them and pick them off one by one. I finished upgrading my base and then sat around the campfire until nightfall. I felt bad leaving my new friend in such a small pen, so on day 12 I increased the size of his pen, as well as finding him a new friend to soon mate with. I carved out an area near the water that would allow me to build up a new home with quick access to the ocean. It didn't take long for it to turn dark, so we will finish it up tomorrow. On day 13 I continued building, using some questionable practices along the way. I spent the entire day building into the night. We didn't quite finish yet, but that will be the task for tomorrow. I checked up on my boar friends on day 14, then went over to finish my house and make it feel more like home. I checked up on my boar friends one last time before deciding it was time to call it a night. The next day, day 15, I started my morning by chopping some wood. Then, I got a notification that my boar friends were tamed. I went to check up on them to confirm. After seeing they were fully tamed, I decided to give my newfound friend a fitting name. I expanded their pen, began the breeding process, then called it a night. On day 16, I gave Mama Pig a name, though this attachment would be short-lived. I made some final upgrades to my home before heading out into the Black Forest to find some more burial chambers. We did this until nightfall, and then we called it a night. I harvested my bees bright and early on day 17, got back on my Walter White vibes, then crafted some much needed bronze and gear. I made some better food, then headed out to farm copper ore until I couldn't hold anymore. I went back to check up on Walter, cut down some trees, then went to bed. I set up a portal on day 18 since I knew I would be crossing the water to get to the next boss. I then farmed all the necessary components needed to make a boat, then slept to prepare for the next day. Yeah, we didn't boat anywhere the next day. Instead, on day 19 I took a few burial chambers, gaining much needed supplies before running into an enemy that would have me running like the little boy in the Grape commercial. I went home and saw my 2-star piglet had grown up, so I decided to give her a fitting name. Good night. On day 20, I get to finally start using a mod that would solve my storage situation indefinitely, which is something that drove me crazy in vanilla. I decided to do some fishing as well, but instead of catching fish, I aimed the fish, damn near drowning in the process. It didn't help that once I got over to the other side, I was ambushed by a group of thugs, and in order to preserve my name, I booked it home and began transferring all my loot into my new home. I finished moving all my loot on day 21, I checked up on my boars, cut some wood, then for some reason my primordial brain decided, hey, dig hole. And so I did. We'll get back to the hole later, but now it's time for bed. Sanity was truly kicking in on day 22, as I decided I wanted another hole, but over here this time. This hole would have a purpose though, as it would be my temporary boar farm until the main hub is complete. I spent the day working on this boar farm, but decided to call it an early night since I would need my rest for what's to come. Day 23 was quite the interesting day. I finished up the boar farm, getting my first boar in with relative ease, but for some reason my second boar was putting up a fight. Luckily, she had just given birth to a piglet, which I would graciously abduct to be put into forced labor. We do not speak of this. Good night. Did I do nothing on day 24 but farm chambers and copper? Yes. Good night. Quarter of the way there, day 25. What do? Farm. I finished up my boar farm and brought my adult boar up to its pen, where it shall spend the rest of eternity doing my bidding. And yes, I slept just fine. In order to keep up with my growing appetite, I decided to build a farm on day 26, since that would be the next sensible thing to do. We flattened the land and put up some walls for protection before calling it a night. I finished up the farm on day 27, getting the last walls down and planting some seeds. I wanted to put walls around my boar farm, but when I saw how much wood it needed, I just went to bed. Day 28 will be the most tragic day for me, and at no fault of my own. My computer crashed while at the boar farm, and upon loading back into the game, the last save location was quite interesting. The worst part is, all the footage up to before it crashes was lost, so we just had to bite the bullet and move on. But I was unaware that there was another bullet behind the first one, and I was attacked by the same thugs from earlier, but this time they brought friends. Afterwards, I checked up on my pigs, then made use of another mod on my list, Plant Everything, which I had used to plant raspberry bushes and blueberry bushes. You can take me out of the mines, but you can't take the mines out of me, so I farmed copper till nightfall, then called it a night. We start off day 29 by clearing out the rest of our old camp, then began running towards a good location to cross the ocean. I cleaned up the neighborhood, then set a portal down to go home and rest before the next day. On day 30, I ran into a troll when passing through my portal, and I thought he would be another good worker I can exploit for free. But he must have gotten the news of what I did to his brother, because he took it personal. I made the walk of shame back to my items, then made sure to put the troll in his place. By this time, it had gotten dark, so it was off to bed before our big journey tomorrow. Day 31. What a day. I found a nearby abandoned village and decided I would fix up one of these huts to house my portal. I scouted the boss area, grabbing the last Grey Dwarf seed needed for the boss fight. Afterwards, I farmed burial chambers straight into day 32, which resulted in me almost getting my ass kicked. I then booked it home, crafted up some much needed gear, then tended to my farm before heading to bed. I have the seeds, I have the gear, I must take the boss fight on day 33, right? Wrong. I noticed that I had found the shopkeeper on the map, so I decided I would head over to set up a little portal area. Although this little portal area doesn't seem like much, it will have a crucial role in the near future. All this building gave me a lust for blood, so I caused havoc in the borehole before calling it a night. Yeah, borehole. I like that one. 3 days after reaching the boss location, it's time to fight the Elder. Who would have guessed it would take all day to fight a boss? But nonetheless, that concluded day 34. Day 35 can be summed up in 3 words. Farm, boat, wood. Oh, and I placed down a fermenter. Good night. It was time to set sail on day 36 to find a swamp and find me some iron. I spent way too much time fixing up this awful structure, which I wish I didn't do looking back. But oh well. When heading into the swamp on day 37, I killed some leeches as they were the first enemies I encountered in the swamp. Unfortunately, that was short-lived, as the swamp was not even half a map grid, so I picked up shop and set sail, hoping to find better swamps. As nighttime fell, I decided to go to shore, set up a little outpost, then head home to prepare for the next day. Day 38 was interesting. I did my normal farm and Walter routine per usual, but something must have been bothering me that day, as I put all things aside to excavate my hole from earlier. Now, I took it to the next level, as I had made this hole much larger than what was there previously. After wasting the day doing this, I decided that now is the appropriate time to head into the swamp. Shortly after exploring the swamp and realizing how tiny it was, I was ambushed by a wraith, who swiftly chased me out of the swamp. After this scare, I decided it would be best to leave and find another swamp in the morning. We set sail again on day 39, hoping to find a larger swamp. I find what seems to be a promising swamp, so I set up a little hut and headed home to call it a night. On day 40, we get our first taste of iron, and boy does it feel good. Unfortunately, this feeling was short-lived, as this was the only sunken crypt in the entire swamp. So, we once again packed our bags and headed out into the open sea. After some sailing, I found what looked to be a pretty decent swamp, when a wraith literally came out of the water and began chasing me. Fearing for my life, I booked it to the nearest structure that I could, put up a portal, and went home safely. Day 41, we head right into the swamp, and luckily, I had found myself a sunken crypt, which I gladly spent the entire day excavating. I cooked up the iron that I got, then went to bed. We start day 42 with a little bit of farming before heading back into the swamp and continuing day 2 of iron farming. I wonder how much of this I'm gonna do. If you can guess what I do on day 43, you have to like and subscribe, okay? Okay. I mined iron. 3 days straight. Which is okay, because on the next day, day 44, I decided I would explore the area near my shopkeeper and see how much there was to work with. After a long day of exploring, we go back home and rest for tomorrow. Back to work on day 45 as we head deeper into the swamp, searching for crypts. Unfortunately, there wasn't much for me to loot, so I set sail in search of more iron. At a glance at the map, something popped into my mind that decided I would put my iron voyage on pause, and I decided I would spend my time mapping out my entire starter island. And I mean the entire thing. The island was so large, in fact, that the exploration went right into day 46, which, after mapping my entire starter island, I wanted to map my shop island, which led me to exploring more than that, and I did this right into day 47. At this point, I was going on 3 days at sea, and I knew I needed to get off this boat soon. Thankfully, I came across what looked to be a good-sized swamp, so I set up shop and placed down a portal. Then, I went home to do a quick farm run before finally calling it a night. The next day, day 48, starts out with some new exploration of my area. I clear some pesky leeches before running into this giant tree-like structure called an abomination. I thought I would take a chance and fire a few arrows at it, but after seeing how little damage I do, I scurried my way into a nearby crypt where I farmed the entire rest of the day before heading home and going to bed. On day 49, we made some upgrades to our workbench, as well as doing a little bit of cooking. We head back into the swamp and spend the rest of our time mining iron, which leads us right into day 50, halfway there. I head to the trader to make some purchases, upgrading my cooking station, then farmed more iron. I ran into a group of leeches, and I may have bit off a little more than I could chew. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the rest of my adventure, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.